because this is the emerging market. And there's strong reasons to do it, of all kinds of reasons, in fact, because there's no benefit to South Africa to allow these mergers. But we know for sure, as has happened all of the other times, and I can take you back to the 1970s again, all the times the mergers happen, seed prices go up. They go up all of the time out of the context of commodity prices. Farmers lose significantly, and seed prices become a bigger and bigger share of their costs, and pesticides. That always has happened. We will lose because they will reduce their research in agriculture. Every time mergers happen, companies reduce their research. Why spend money on R&D when you can spend the money on PR instead? What you do is you talk about what you're going to do, you don't actually do it. So you advertise these great new Disneyland theme parks of activity and research, but you don't really carry through on them. Why do that? There's no competition. Why take the risk? If you invest money in research, you've got about 1 chance in 100 of actually getting something through. If you invest money in public relations, you always make money out of it. And then, this is the mixed part, the danger is still there that we identified back in the 1970s, which was that when the companies, the pesticide companies looked at the seed companies, and why it was we were able to say, even in 1981, that they're going to develop herbicide-tolerant plant varieties, the logic was that the cost of, well, I'll bring it up to today's dollars. The cost of developing a new GM plant variety, according to the US Department of Agriculture, is $136 million per plant variety. The cost of developing a new herbicide, again, US government figures, is $256 million. So it's vastly cheaper, almost 2 to 1, to adapt the plant to the chemical than to adapt the chemical to the plant. So the task before these companies is to change nature. And the new techniques, the new gene drive techniques that we'll be talking about probably still this afternoon, that new strategy of digital DNA is their route to do that, their route to get greater control over that marketplace. But it can be stopped. I was in Geneva 2 days ago, and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is looking at its competition law and looking at ways it can strengthen that into an international treaty to make these kinds of mergers impossible. That won't stop this round of mergers, but it could stop the round that involves the farm machinery companies. We're seeing in the OECD new discussions there themselves about, has this gone too far? Most surprisingly, I'll end with this, even the Chicago School, that wonderful group of clowns that have been guiding competition policy since the 1970s, and who said in the 1970s, we don't need to worry about competition in that way. We just got to make sure consumer prices go down. Having 4 companies control 50% of the market is irrelevant. That's what they said. Well, the Chicago School had a conference at the beginning of March, and reviewing their historic view on competition policy, and came back saying, you know, maybe we've gone a bit too far. We're seeing a decline in research. We're seeing a decline in the number of startup companies. We're seeing a decline in value. We're seeing that the oligopolies being created aren't giving us benefit. That's the Chicago School saying that. So there is a chance now, I think, to turn this around and perhaps fight back to get the kind of food system we really need to have. And I should stop talking now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pat. I'm sure you all have lots of questions, but we're going to save time at the end. So if you can just keep track of your questions. I believe John Nzira is here now. Yes, hi. So we introduced you without you being here, so you're up next if you'd like to come. That's all right. Yep, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to say much, but it's all about sharing. And I'm going to look at the small scale way of life, the communities, how we can survive in communities without the dependence from the outside forces. I'm going to talk about a little bit about decolonizing ourselves from the powers that are around us at international level. As she introduced me, I'm John Nzira. I'm a farmer, and I'm a farmer who actually design the food system that I need, the type of food that I want to eat. I have to plan myself. I don't need to buy seeds from big companies. I don't need to have big machines to implement or to plow on my farm. I plan and use the local resources to make sure that I get what I need. So unfortunately, the PowerPoint is not yet. What's the problem? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, as a farmer, I go out and train and work with farmers, living with farmers, other farmers, to make sure they, together, we produce the food we desire, the type of food or creating nutrition that is required by the farmers by what we want. We set what we want in the communities, not to expect much forces from outside. So we're gonna look into how we can look at how we can save seeds, how we can take care of the environment, how we can manage the environment as a whole to make sure that we produce what we want. As you know, we have communities. Communities are complex. It's not, you cannot take community as a one unit, but community and the food systems is complex. What community sustain on is not what we think as scientists, that people, the community, they sustain on certain type of food like maize. I'm going to talk about a few things that we know, but I will explain a little bit of why I'm talking about these things. For example, here, we have a system that is there. You know, from 1948, after the Second World War, chemicals were created. They were taken from Second World War. They make chemicals for agriculture purpose. The Green Revolution came into Africa, but it never resulted in a good thing. And when these things come, they create dependence to our farmers. They create dependence to whoever is a farmer, because the machinery that is there needs maintenance. And the chemicals that are there, they are destroying nature, they are destroying a number of things. So usually these chemicals, these systems, they are coming with a package for benefiting only few companies, whilst the farmers, the communities, they suffer. And for the presentation I'm talking about, I'm going to emphasize that we don't need this. If we need this technology, where should we apply it? Not in communities, rural communities, not at a small scale farmers. Because the small scale farmers, they are, if they are trapped into using the chemicals and other things like this, it's dependence and they become poor and poor and poor. And it's a way of colonizing people again. So all this stuff, they are designed to make the corporates be rich and making the local people poor. So in our system, at the end of the day, what you eat, you end up being in the hospital. What you eat, you don't know what you are eating. Where is it coming from? Is it from a country that you know how did the farmers grow it? You don't know. How did the importation of these products, what was the process? Who benefited? Was there a back door? Was there a fair deal? Sometimes not. But usually, sometimes yes. And when it happens, it's in the expense of the farmer. It's in the expense of the citizens of a particular country. Because politicians, they can make this happen, and when they make this happen, they take the taxpayers' money and make deals with the internationals and get benefits out of them for their family. But the poor person will continue to be poor and poor. So at the end, the poor is become poor and become non-existent in a way, because there is no proper food that they will get from their farms. So in the farming activities, you find that the modern farming, the industrial farming, it results with, it comes all this negative impact on the environment. And when they come, this negative impact in the environment, who is affected more is us, is the poor people or the communities that are affected more. Because when they get this problem, they cannot be able to resolve these issues. I'm trying to be fast because my time is just limited. When we look at this, this is how we do our approach in working with communities. For example, we don't just say go to community and work with the community without involving them. We need to go in the community and make dialogues with them, learn what they eat, learn what how they farm, involve with them, interact with them, and work together on appropriate technology that is suitable for the community. And continue do trainings, engage with them with different type of trainings, and look at lifelong skills to support the communities, and create and support the knowledge sharing in the community. Because usually it's not, even if you are trained in agriculture, you find that you don't have enough training, enough knowledge compared to the person who is farming, who has been farming for many, many years. Because this person in the rural area or in the community has acquired knowledge from his ancestors, from his elders in the community. And he has the knowledge that we have to learn from them and share, and bring in appropriate technology to support what is there. We are not really experts in agriculture. The experts in agriculture is the farmer out there at a small scale. I'm going to talk, as I say, decolonization. It starts with seeds. Most farmers, you find a farm being a monoculture. That is part of my farm. As I say, I'm a farmer. So what you see there, I don't see only one type of crop. You have maize, you have different types of crops there. That means diversity. It's diversity to the nature, it's diversity to the seeds that I'm gonna get there, diversity to the food that I'm gonna eat, and hence it helps in the nutritional requirement of the family. And I won't go to hospital for treatments because my land is the doctor. The maize that has been traditional in our society, most of us, those who eat pap, you find that you eat white pap. Why do you eat white pap? Why do we eat white pap? Because you saw someone eating it and you continue eating it. What's in the white pap? Yeah, sometimes we don't know exactly what's in the white pap. But if we continue to the original, to the indigenous, although maize is not indigenous in Africa, it's indigenous in Mexico, but the maize that came those years, long time ago, it was of that color, that type. And if we continue back, if we start doing this, we cut the dependence syndrome of getting supply of maize from Monsanto or from seed companies or from the government. Because with the government, they take only one type of seed and then they breed it and bring it to us. We buy it. Where's the money going? It's going to the rich people or to the companies. And then the poor people will continue suffering. And to us, we are saying, let's go to the basis. Let's go to the originality, to the indigenous, and work out exactly what kind of seeds can we keep. And revive all the traditional seeds that we need to keep. Like a program in Zimbabwe, we have a program in Zimbabwe where we focus in stopping growing maize, and we are growing only millet. And growing millet, five-finger millet, it has market, and it's very nutritious, it's medicinal, it has so much out of it. And you can see one farmer having about 50 varieties of seeds from one farm. What does that mean? It means diversity, it means food security, it means food sovereignty, it means everything, it means sustainability. So when you talk of food security or sustainability in communities, at least a farmer has to have a wide variety of seeds. I'm gonna be very fast, time is gone. So farmer rights, who makes a choice for the farmer? If we look at big companies, they are trying to make choice for us. That's why they come with a package of seeds, pesticides and what. We don't need pesticides. If they ever ask us, in their research, have they ever involved us? No, they never involved us. It was scientists from a particular university. They come and do research and they agreed with the government, agreement with internationals, and then they bring what doesn't belong to us. We have a knowledge that we can apply to get what we want on farms. So it's our choice to grow what we want. It's not the choice from somewhere else. The methodology of farming that we do is something that we make sure that it takes care. It's a system that supports the environment and supports us as a family and supports the community and at large supports the government at large. If the government listen to us and even if the internationals listen to us. We try by all means to work with nature. We cannot ignore the environment that is within us. That's why when we grow food, we also grow trees, we also grow plants, that we bring them back into the system. So we do agroforestry, we mix trees with food, so that we balance nature and what we need to get from the farm. Food and insects, mushrooms and other things. If we ignore nature, we won't be able to have insects. We won't be able to have mushrooms. We won't be able to have other important elements that are in this nature. And we tend to ignore that. And when we do monoculture system, for example, what happens? You eradicate, you remove all the trees. You remove all indigenous or all fruit trees, indigenous fruit trees in the system. And you disturb the ecosystem, the termite mounds, you disturb the whole ecosystem. And when you disturb the whole ecosystem, at the end of the day, you are growing one crop. One crop cannot give you diversity of food or diversity of nutrients that is required by a human being. So we try by all means to work with nature and try to bring trees back into the system of farming. And we try also to create quite big, okay, let me skip this one. There is an important element in farming that we tend to ignore: water. We only wait for water to go in the farm, and when water goes in the farm, in the monoculture system, there are divergence drains that takes water from the farm out into the rivers and to the ocean. And after a few days, the land is dry, you are crying, we need water. In our system, we make sure that we harvest water from the road, from anywhere, and put water in the underground tanks, and also above ground tanks. And also we do swales, ridges, to make sure that water goes into the soil. We do not allow water to go to the ocean through the surface. Water has to go in the soil and infiltrate and support the underground water table. Then it goes straight to support the system underneath and support to the river. If water goes on the surface, then it makes lots of destruction. So we make sure that we protect our fields with the systems that are good to conserve water. Okay. When you see this farm, what do you see? How many crops are there? There are several crops that are there. You can produce what you want. Do you see soil? We protect the soil, and this is what we want to promote all the time. We want to make sure that all our farms, if we continue doing this, we take care of the environment, we take care of the people, and we encourage the government to understand this, and we encourage the big companies to understand this. And then we have a voice from the farmers who will say, this is what we want, and this is the way we are going, and we don't need to be influenced by a certain level of people. And the example I give you, old people, they've been farming millet and maize, they've been farming different crops, and they are farming, and this is exactly in Zimbabwe, where we are working with the farmers to conserve seeds. We are working farmers to conserve traditional seeds, seeds that are indigenous, seeds that came from their ancestors, seeds that came from the community within that area, seeds that have been original in that area. And if we do that, we can be able to change the government. If we set examples that are practical at rural level, at household level, then we are able to change the government. If we can set colleges at household level, every household, every community should have a set of examples of sustainable living, examples of food security, examples of food system that is sustainable. And I thank you.
John, thank you for that and sticking to time as much as possible. Another shift in the program, but Donna, you're going to be up next, and we'll have Stephen close for us. So thank you.
So I'm a runner. I'm an ultra runner actually. So when I hear John start and he starts to go very fast, I can tell you now I can't go very fast because I'm a long distance runner. So I cannot speed at all. But I definitely have 10 minutes allocated to me so that you can do that. So maybe to start off with small 3 things. There's sort of 3 recollections that I have in relation to the politics of seed and food and how it became alive to me. So one is I recall reading The Seed is Mine. And in reading it, I was completely overwhelmed by the deep sense of land, connection to land, seed, community. Or rather, I kept on understanding that the book was trying to trace ideas of memory, dispossession, alienation, resistance, and defiance. But I kept on wondering in 1996 when I read this powerful book, I kept on wondering and asked around me, who are the invisible hands that are doing the sharecropping? And this question of her seed story has continued to come in different ways and has traced my thinking and understanding of land and food and nature. I didn't find the answers of her seed story first in South Africa. I found it in other books, I found it in other lands, I found it through Merchant, I found it through Federici, and I found it through many of the conversations I'm sure many people here are familiar with. So it's not news to anybody here. But for many years, even though this story of her story impacted me and was really important to me, I was involved with WTO and trade-related issues. So the question of seed and patents, etc., was a very abstract and removed conversation for me. And during that period, as a trained political economist, when I listened to Pat, I was brought back into that very particular conversation of thinking about how seed and agriculture gets located within a trade discourse. And it was very, very removed. And yet, somehow along the way, I very quickly understood that there are actually really concrete issues that pertain to food sovereignty that connect us to the issues of trade and trade-related issues, and specifically competition. Over more recent years, I've come to understand her story through the Southern African Rural Women's Assembly. They have put forward the slogan, "Women as guardians of seed, land, and life," which challenges me at many levels. Least of all, the Rural Women's Assembly have taught me how to smuggle seeds across the region in foil little plastic bags, and not just smuggle them across the region, but to direct me to exactly where it goes and to who it goes. So I didn't understand the politics of that at the beginning. And when they spoke about guardians of seed and guardians of life, I kept on thinking to myself, oh, but this goes against this idea of this visceral relationship between my womb and therefore as a woman and therefore as a protector and guardian of seed. But the Rural Women's Assembly have taught me that it's not that connection that they are yearning for. It's not that connection that they are striving for. So I guess in my conversation with you, because I think there are many years of experience in the room, I'm just wanting to have a conversation which is to raise what are the critical questions and considerations for the making of a new food politics in the context of the political frontiers outlined by Pat and the capacity of the agroecology community as foregrounded by John. So Pat in many ways has highlighted the dynamics of Western modernity, so-called progress capitalist development, which not only continues to other our bodies and the ecosystem, but is dependent, as is clearly shown, to the exploitation and destruction of nature and our livelihoods. Understanding the shifting terrain, the sophisticated processes mapped, and how they have control and domination over life, speaks to the intricacies of the biopolitics and biodiversity that is being stripped daily with or without our knowing and seeing. As food activists, we need to know where the resistance needs to be waged, and Pat is beginning to locate that for us. John has pointed to the possibilities of daily praxis, the agency of connecting ideas with living with and through. This work is resistance and alternative making. In many ways, it is a direct and active defiance against local knowledge stripping, bio and cultural diversity erosion. There are many such spaces of resistance in the region, especially where women, small-scale and subsistence farmers are outside of the formal economy. Pat made mention of the 1970s and those conversations, but certainly in the 1970s, the 1980s, many people, many women, many eco-feminists started to speak about women who are outside of the formal economy and how what you refer to as making the alternatives, doing the alternatives, etc., has been in the making and production all the time. It might not be in the universities of wits or in the libraries, but it certainly exists all the time as resisting knowing and knowledge. So, if we take as a given that the food politics we are talking about needs to be located within African political economy, ecological, social, and radical feminist frames, then how do we ensure that it finds echo, and I repeat, echo, as radical and emancipatory, not only for those who till and harvest, but for those of us who are distant from the daily preoccupations of what gets sown, when, and where. Currently, the radical food movement, which as you all know you are part of, but broadly is working on seed, agroecology, land, fish, salt, forests, agrarian questions, social reproduction, and more recently in our conversation they refer to as the commoners. But many of us have been involved in this movement of food resistance in some way. These movements expose, they critique, and they challenge the discourse of food security. This is necessary and important work. But my question to all of us, and my question certainly to myself all the time, is are the calls for decommodification, de-objectification, deprivatization of seed, land, and food, are they sufficient given the ecological crisis? Are they sufficient given the patriarchal capitalist onslaught that we experience every day? Undoubtedly, they are critical in exposing the depths of market-based relationships. But to what extent do they begin to put forward or to point us towards the direction of what it would mean to flourish? Because is that not the conversation of food politics? What would it mean to flourish? What would it mean to flourish in a way which is whole and not fragmented? So, how do we ensure that we make the important political calls of decommodification, deprivatization? And I foreground that. It's not that these calls aren't important. They're essential to us. But we need to extend. We need to move beyond. How do we bring alive the full connection between what is seeded, what is on our plate, how it gets there, where it gets there from, who prepares it, how it nourishes us, our soul, our body, and the systems and the institutions that regulate and define our economy and simultaneously make visible state authoritarianism and the reach on our plate, and most importantly, as the conversation has been so far, to show us how corporate control is ever present on what we put in our bodies and how we put it on our plate and how we serve it. So how do we ensure that these questions are enlivened as a stream all the time, not as separate issues in our conversation? So in deepening and extending the current food sovereignty articulation, my challenge to myself, and hopefully with others here, is do you think that the food sovereignty principles crafted in 2005, do they still suffice? And I would like to have an engagement on that. And that's within one element of what John spoke about, and it's one element of what Pat spoke about, and I suppose it's going to be one element of what Stephen speaks about. Now, it's not, please I repeat this, it's not that we don't want to say that political economy is at the center of the conversation, and that we're not wanting to address issues of capitalism, etc. That's not the question. The question is, how do we begin to make the food question alive to all of us, not just in silos, but begin to unite us differently? Because that will begin to, I believe, think about a way of traction outside of the specificities of the work that we do. So do these questions, the 7 principles rather, do they ensure that the making of food activism is fully emancipatory? Emancipatory, by definition, demands notions beyond food for the productive bodies. It demands that we don't only think of food as nutrition, food so that we can go to work, food for livelihood. I challenge us all Just close your eyes and imagine your food. I do not think when you close your eyes, I challenge you, close your eyes. Challenge. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. When you imagine food, do you imagine it so that you eat it so that you can get ready to go to work? Do you imagine it so that when you eat it that you can do well in your work environment? Hardly. Whatever those images are, those are the images that need to enliven and broaden our seed politics, and certainly our land and food movement. Emancipatory, by definition, like I said, means that we move beyond food as nutrition. Food, as said by experts, to be healthy, good, or better. It requires the breaking down of the binaries, the hierarchies, and asks us to reimagine food as something that is part of, exactly as John has begun to describe, something which is part of the collective, the community, solidarity, nature, and central to the many alternatives we are co-constructing. So when you close your eyes, or rather when I close my eyes, those things come alive for me. To see community, connectivity, people, to be able to see the solidarity of food. So could we imagine a food movement that begins to co-create microcosms for the type of ecosystems we, or you, and I want to commune in? Could we build a radical politics of food within every movement? That's my challenge to us. Could we begin to build a radical politics, an emancipatory politics that is in every movement, thus moving the food movement beyond its silos and single issue campaigns towards an integral component of every social movement. Through this we could embed and generate ideas of food which are rooted in sufficiency, pleasure, well-being, memory, local knowledge, biodiversity, taste, texture, family, our entire being. There is no social movement and political space that does not have food situated in the center of it. Even at this meeting. I came, the first thing I said was, I was hungry, I was stuck in the car, can I please eat and can I have water? Those were my first words. So even in this space, it's situated. And in every, I don't think anybody can not have a conversation about how food is situated. For me, my challenge to ourselves, and certainly in my movement, is how do we unearth the ways and the assumption of food in the spaces we create. And in so doing, begin to bring a lens to see, like I said earlier, which food, who cooks, who organizes, who decides, who pays. This gives us an opportunity to make food and the politics of food visible. Not in a normative way, but instead as a way to tackle directly in our movement, and certainly in food politics, issues of patriarchy, capitalism, power, agency, etc. So radical food politics, I believe, has